Tonight's episode of CanoeHound's Outdoor Adventure Show is brought to you by Kid Products, stick stoves and reflector ovens proudly made in Canada. Algonquin Outfitters, with 5 key locations in and around Algonquin Park to serve your backcountry needs. Salis Marine, keeping you safe on the water since 1999. Ostrom Outdoors, custom fit canoe packs and CanoeHound for those of you that might be new to the show. If you are new to the show, thanks very much for tuning in. You're tuning in to what's sure to be a classic tonight. Let's see here. We have a good show lined up for you tonight with somebody who I've actually idolized in my years of canoe paddling. Somebody who, to me, was a real inspiration to do a lot of the paddling that I actually do. And I'm sure he's had an influence on many of your paddling tenures as well. So stick around for that. We're going to have a good time tonight and learn a little bit more about what his inspirations are for what he actually does as well. Before we get on with that for anybody that might be new to the show, or if you're tuning into the show after the fact, CanoeHound's Outdoor Adventure Show is obviously live every Tuesday evening, and we are also available for replay on our past episodes playlist on CanoeHound Adventures. For those of you that might not be able to hit it, all the time on the computer or on your television, it's also available now as a podcast on YouTube Music, and it's totally free. We're testing the waters there to see how that's going to go, and any feedback that you can provide to us on that, whether it worked, didn't work, things that you like, maybe you didn't like. If you could share that with me and let me know so that I could try to improve and bring you a better podcast / live stream pass / replay show, whatever it might be. So any input that you might have for that would be a good thing for me. If you missed last week's show, we had a really good show. It was our 5th annual winter camping special. For those of you who may be looking to learn or figure out how to get out there and winter camp comfortably, how to stay warm, the food to use, the equipment to bring with you, then you definitely want to check out that show. We were joined by Camper Christina. We had Pine Martin, Nate Smith, and Nick Gordon from Now Outdoors. And they all know their stuff, and they really did share a lot of great information. They've been on past episodes of our winter camping episodes, season 1, season 2, season 3, and season 4. If you did see last week's show, but you might have missed the episodes previous in the previous years, you know what? Go back and check them out. They're well worth the information. The information never grows old when it comes to learning about winter camping. So check it out and leave us some comments. Let us know what we're doing right there as well. Also from last week's show, Camper Christina offered, and we did a swag giveaway, and we gave away 2 copies of her online winter camping course for beginners. And just like to say that it was Trish Harrison and Lyle from Venture Productions. Congratulations on winning that. You're going to enjoy that course as much as I did. And even if you know what you're doing when it comes to winter camping, I can bet you're going to take away some knowledge from it, just learning a little bit of different things, because everybody does things differently. And if you can find something that makes the process a little easier, a little more comfortable, a little more warming, you're that much farther ahead. And it's really fun to do this little course, do little quizzes at the end. So great job by Camper Christina putting that together. This week, I'd like to welcome a new channel member. We got Steve Bentley. Steve, if you're watching the show, or if you happen to watch us at a later time, drop me your email or your mailing address to canoehound@gmail.com. That way there I can get your membership decals out to you, get your perks started. And to the many, many, many other camper or channel members that we have, well, you know what? Thank you very much for your patronage and your contributions to the show. And for anybody that might be interested in becoming a channel member, there is a link over here somewhere, I think, that says join. By all means, check it out. If it's for you, you'd be helping to support a great cause. Sorry about that. I'm just trying to get my other screen going so I'm on the same page. But yeah, so, if you're interested, please do become a channel member, or at least see what it has to do with. Also this week, want to thank Beauty of the Backcountry, Riley Outside, and also Steve Bentley. for your contributions to Buy Me a Coffee. Thank you very much. Let's take a dip. Cheers to you all, and everybody out there, Hopefully everybody's gearing up for this their Christmas holidays. I know our guest tonight said that his significant other and his daughter are working on Christmas decorations. Everybody should be doing that around this time, and getting their Christmas trees up and getting all festive for the season. Let's see here. Where are we at? Birthday announcements and well wishes. I do this every week. I like to, I'd like to spread the cheer. Happy birthday wishes go out to Christina Neargarth. Good friend Ted Baird is celebrating a birthday. I think his might have been yesterday. Brooke Gautreau, and somebody who was on the show last week is one of our winter camping experts, Pine Martin. Martin is celebrating a birthday as well, coming up very soon. So happy birthday to all of you. And if anybody has a birthday or a well wish that they would like to share here on the show, all you need to do is drop me an email right here at canoehound@gmail.com. I'll do my darndest to get it up here on screen, or at least make mention of it during the show. And let's share the love. Also, if you have any guests or topics that you'd like to see on the show, there again, I reply to all emails. So drop me an email at canoehound@gmail.com. And as I say every week, this is the magic email address. So by all means, please do reach out to me if you like. It doesn't even have to be a suggestion. If you just want to say hi, say hi. I'll say hi back. And now tonight, as we get through tonight's topic or a guest, and you know what? Questions are always welcome. Just please do me one favor and drop the word question before your question in capital letters or something, or a big giant Q or whatever it might be, just so I can recognize it as a question. I will put a star. I will mark it here on my screen here. And when I get to the appropriate time, I will try to ask that question. If not, we'll utilize them towards the end of the show, maybe a little rapid fire question period, and we'll get through them as well. So please don't be shy when it comes to that. So enough of that. If you've made it this far, that's great, because now we're going to introduce tonight's guest. Tonight, I'm lucky enough to have this fine gentleman on the show again. He's been a past guest and also a panelist on several topics we've covered on the show. Many of us are familiar with his stance and measures he takes to help protect our precious backcountry in the old growth forests of Ontario. Many more are familiar with his popular canoe route guidebooks, novels, artwork. He and his wife are the owners and operators of Cabin Falls Echo Lodge and Echo Trail Builders. Please welcome to the live stream tonight, Hap Wilson. How you doing, Hap?
I'm doing well, thanks. Thanks, Dennis, for the invitation. And just to clarify, my pronoun is he, him.
He, him?
Yes, I just thought I'd throw that out there just to make sure.
That's awesome. Well, man, you're a busy guy. You've been hard at it there with Echo Falls and your Echo Trail Builders, and you're just trying to seek out a little respite at home now, a little rest and relaxation.
Yeah, my wife and I work hard for 6-7 months, almost 8 months a year, and we like to take the winters off 4 months just to regenerate, and we're back home, and we live in the country here, so it's and when we're operating in Cabin Falls, it's noisy. The first thing we notice when we get home here, it's quiet. It's the only thing we hear is the wind blowing or the wolves howling in the sanctuary next door, and it's kind of nice. We're very, very lucky to have both properties in I wouldn't say wilderness here, but we're in a remote section of Muskoka, of all places.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you really like the Muskoka area, don't you? Have you sort of lived around that area all your life, type of thing?
No, not at all. Actually, I was looking for some place that was safe after coming from Temagami, where I went through about 10 or 12 death threats over the years, for being an activist. Right. So I was looking for some place that has a strong, kind of a holistic or a good strong arts foundation here in Muskoka. It certainly does have that, and we're close to a lot of pockets of good day tripping here, close to Algonquin. Although we're 2.5 hours from Temagami, So, and it's quiet here. We're on a dead end street, and we have a bit of acreage, and we have snowshoe and ski trails here that yeah, we keep up, and just basically keep in shape,
I was gonna say
for
that's
the
how you keep
busy
yourself all
season.
fit, right?
So
Yeah,
yeah, so it's. I mean, I'd say we're pretty lucky. I'd say we um, just to have that opportunity. Like I say, we work hard, and then we feel like almost just shutting down for 4 months through the winter.
sure thing, sure. I got one quick question. It doesn't even relate to the show, but it relates to everybody says, yeah, I'd love to move up north and I'd like to buy a campgrounds or a resort or a cottage resort or something along that lines. Is it all it's cracked up to be?
Well, I know people who have they aspire to move up north, and they maybe having a regular job down in the city, and they just get tired of it, and they like fishing or they like canoeing, and so they and they'll pick up a lodge, an old rundown fishing camp, and turn it into whatever, and spend a lot of money, and then realize, well, it's a lot of work. It's like 24 hours a day, and 7 days a week, and um, there's the marketing aspect. I mean, if you like fishing and canoeing, that you still have to have a fairly strong uh, you know background in financial background, how to properly do books, how to market, all that stuff that goes along with running a tourist establishment. It's not that easy, and it takes a lot of time. You're running, when you're running a lodge, like we run our lodge, from in just after breakup and right up to almost freeze up, and you're with people. I'm up at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, getting things ready, and we take them out guiding or instruction or whatever, hiking some of the old growth trails, but you're with them till the campfires, out 10 o'clock at night. So it's long hours, and people, I don't think people actually realize just how much work goes into running an outfitting company or a lodge for that matter. But that's great. I mean, if you can handle it, and um, it's hard on couples if you don't have a good strong relationship with your partner, then it could end up
Yeah,
in the separation, or could end up disastrous
sure.
consequences. So
So,
um,
but really, you're working. Like your summers are working summers. They're not. It's not a pleasure cruise being out there at Cabin Falls, right? You're always building. You're always renovating.
well, yeah, we're running two companies, and we've been building sustainable trails since almost since 1980. When I was a ranger in Temagami,
Mhm.
and that's a lot of work. And these are mostly um, built by hand, not machinery. These are all, most of these trails that we put in are sculpted and surgically put in, so we don't disturb the ground mat and what have you. So a lot of care goes into the 20 different sciences into sustainable trail building. So it's a lot of work. We build structures, boardwalks, and viewing stations, and we try to utilize um, anything that's on site that we can utilize for construction purposes, and try to do it with as little footprint as we can. Same with running our lodge. We repurpose a lot of materials that you find so much stuff in Muskoka here, from building sites that you can reclaim windows, doors,
Mhm.
a lot of building materials, that are still sound and in good shape. So we take a lot of that up to our lodge, and that's how we um, built into our structures up there. So we're not using, and we use all managed, from most of what that goes in there is from managed forest, where we cultivate whatever products that we can find, or natural building materials from on site. So
Yeah, give it that
it's
natural
not
feel,
perfect
right?
by any stretch of the imagination. We still use a float plane for just getting our supplies in, but we find more people today are paddling in and out from our lodge, which is a great experience for people. It gives them a break, and you get a chance to see. We spend a lot of time in maintaining trails up there through some of the best old growth forest in North America. So it's an educational process too. We like to think of ourselves as a learning, teaching facility too. So
Yeah.
that's important to us, that we like to share what we have up there. I mean, we're very fortunate to have our own property in the wilderness park. They actually built the park around a property that's been there for, for some time, for almost 100 years. So
yeah, like 1931, I think you said, right? Was it 1931?
That's correct.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned that you were a park ranger in Temagami. How many years was that? Like,
Yeah, that was like, I've been paddling up there. I was offered a job in Toronto as an illustrator, and it was very lucrative. I had some good contacts, and my first showing was at the O'Keefe Center in Toronto with Taller Cranston. If people remember the figure skater. But my job offer didn't fly. It didn't fly very well because my would-be employer asked me to start, for a 6-day a week job in Toronto. And I said, well, I can't do that. I've got a canoe trip coming up. So he said, I don't think this is the right guy for the job.
way more important.
So, yeah, the money wasn't that important, but I had been paddling up I started in Algonquin when I was a teenager, and did some pretty lengthy trips when I was mid-teenager, and then found Temagami, and started up there in 69, 70, and then paddled for years before. And at that time, I got interested in the environment stuff. So in 1972, same year, Greenpeace got started on the West Coast, and it was starting right here in mid-Canada, right in Temagami, developing Maple Mountain, which is Beijing is a place where the soul spirit dwells. That's a religious site for the Temagami Anishinaabe people, and of course the Ontario government in their vision thought that'd be a great place to put a ski hill. So that sort of kick-started the environment movement there, and I got interested in that as part of my own personal goal is to sort of give back to or fight for what was important, not just to me, but to a lot of other people who cherish that area. And it's been a canoeing mecca for a long time, and it's been the Nadaki Manan, which is the traditional territory for the Temagami Anishinaabe for eons, and it was being pillaged, and without any checks or balances. So somebody had to do something. So, and it wasn't just me on my own. There was many other people throughout my life who were either mentors to me or fought side by side on the front lines in the environment movement. And these are unsung heroes, and they're selfless and very driven, passionate people. And some have passed away, Bob Hunter, Terry Graves, good people, and they weren't in it for for their own for their own reasons. They were very devoted people, and I had the opportunity. I went to the ministry office in 1975, 76, I think, and I complained. I said, look, what's going on in the bush is it's a travesty. We're losing portages and these beautiful canoe routes. And I said, well, look, let's and a lot of people don't realize that the only park in Temagami in the mid 70s was the Lady Evelyn River Waterway Park, and people gravitate towards parks. So that was there's more people on that river in the mid 1970s than there is today. And well, that's because people didn't mind portaging back then. People, there's a new genre of paddler. They don't like those legendary portages in Temagami as much. So there's a lot of traffic back then, and and it was getting trashed. Really, there was fly-on operators doing heavy fishing there, and a lot of people just and they had garbage dumps established on on the river, which I thought was ludicrous. And I said, look, like you need to do a proper inventory of that whole 10,000 square kilometer area. Then it takes in 4 administrative districts. None of the other administrative districts in our district wanted anything to do with it, because that meant that while it would interfere with logging practices and mining, and then we'd have to put money into a maintenance program. So we took it over in Temagami. I was hired as a illustrator and cartographer and a ranger. Took over the ranger program, and we went out there, and for 2 years we used an axe to clear portages that hadn't been cleared for a long time. And how big those trees are, and it was good, strong, heavy work. And they were afraid to give us a chainsaw because they thought that we would cut our legs off. Not that an axe work was dangerous or anything, but our radio systems didn't work beyond Maple Mountain. So we were in the this is way before, we had sat phones and that technology. So we were out there for weeks on end. So, yeah, no, I was there for a number of years and got into other projects, working on the initial park, wilderness park plan as a cartographer and a consultant. And we worked with the information that we had from Thor Conway, was the regional archaeologist there, and he had only really worked in about 10% of the district as far as discovering what was there. And then before he was terminated by the ministry because it was controversial, he was coming up with some really good stuff, and that that sort of went against the grain with the developers and logging companies. So that's what happened, back then, was if they don't like your survey and it doesn't, if it doesn't pan out with as far as the, commercial enterprises, then that was it. So,
Right.
but yeah, and we, that with my first wife and I were hired in '77 to map out. I already paddled years in Temagami. I already knew the district, and I had been keeping journal notes and that. So we went out and did the whole thing. I think we paddled over 3,000 kilometers that summer. It's a 10,000 square kilometer area. It's a big area, and put together the Temagami Canoe Route book, which is this one. I think people have some
There we
copies.
go.
Don't get rid of these because I've seen them on Amazon for a couple $100. So
The Holy Grail right there.
this one, if you can see it,
To me,
it's
that's
kinda
the Holy Grail.
this one's kind of glossy, and it was a test run. We made four copies with a plasticized cover, and you see the price on the inside,
$2.
$2. They were selling it for $2, and mailing it out was costing them more to mail it out to people than than it was to print the book almost. So after a couple of years, and we sold out 5,000 copies first year. It was incredibly popular. And that when the book came out, that meant that's when they hired me on to clear the portages after that, because they they needed some. You can't just publish a book and then tell people to go out there, because those portages were in dire shape. They hadn't been cleared since the canoe brigades back in the 1920s, and so that was quite a chore trying to doing all that axe work to clear out the portages and do that initial mapping and putting that book together. So it's that. So the emphasis was not to make it, for me, it was not just to make it easier for the paddler. It was, there were other reasons. One was to protect the traditional territories, Nadaki Manan, which mirrors that traditional canoeing area. And if you look at the new Temagami book, it shows that comparison with that traditional territory. And the Nestogan, a lot of people probably know that the Nestogan is one of the oldest, still intact Aboriginal trail systems in the world. That's that's very special place. And we were losing those routes on a regular basis. So the book would also spread out the traffic away from that initial park system that was getting heavily used. So people had more opportunity to explore different areas, and that kind of worked well. And unfortunately, when I worked on the initial park plan in Temagami, we used the sensitive features report that had all the ANSI sites and the archaeology that Thor Conway had worked on there and previous parks people. It was all in these 3 binders, which mysteriously disappeared when they got rid of the Temagami office and moved it to North Bay. And we, along with the lands planner at the time, we spent several months working on a what we thought was the best park plan, which encapsulated about 93% of all the sensitive features in Temagami, included areas, all of the Solace wildlands, all the area that you see, which is spiderwebbed with forest reserves and waterway parks now, which was added on to what we have in the wilderness park. The wilderness park was much bigger. It was like 2 to 3 times the size of what we did get. And that was because the regional directors didn't like the idea of restricting or taking that inventory away from logging companies. So the boundaries became arbitrary. which often happens in park systems. And woodland caribou is another good example of arbitrary lines, which really hurt the woodland caribou population. And that allowed them to log into these areas to the periphery of the park. And through a lot of petitions and environmental work, they added conservation reserves and waterway parks, which don't have a lot of protection status as is. So they left all these donut holes, which we're still trying to protect today, like Solace Wildlands. That's 3 sensitive wetland features that have absolutely no protection, and then the government left out huge stands of old growth forest out of their inventory. So it's an ongoing battle. It hasn't stopped, and I've been doing this for 50 years, and like I say, there's a team of people working on this stuff. It's not just me. It's not about what I've done. It's what a team of people who are dedicated to protecting these areas, and it all depends too on the political climate at the time, which is pretty tough these days to get any work done in the environment conservation.
Sure. So the Temagami Canoe Routes book, which to me is my holy grail. Like I say, I had a nice old copy that I lent out, never got it back, and I still cry about that to this day because I'm doing it right now. But so that was never really intended to be like a commercialized canoe routes book. It was more like you weren't inspired to write it as a canoe routes book. It was more in your efforts to try and help save and document Temagami then.
Yeah, all my books actually have been the emphasis has been on environmental protection or river protection, and sure, it's great for paddlers, and one way to protect the areas is to get people to use it, and throughout this country. There wasn't a huge movement by the backcountry fraternity, and it's still a bit disjointed now. We don't have a really strong voice, a collective voice, which is too bad. Not like the United States or some European countries, very strong advocates for wilderness protection. So it's it's a bit of an ongoing struggle. But as far as commercial aspect of it, the government wanted to make money on this, and it's funny they didn't go for the glossy cover because the books would have lasted longer. They wouldn't wear out as quickly, so they wouldn't be replaced as fast.
Did the original version not have the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources logo on it or something?
Yeah, I think the second printing, this is the first book that was put out. It had 150 typo errors in it, which wasn't edited very, very carefully. And second edition, they had the logo. Second edition had the Ontario government logo on it, but then they said that we can't make any money on selling this. Let's say you're only selling this for $2, and it's costing you money to mail them out to people. So, I said, well, they said, no, why don't you take over the publication? So I took over the publication from then on. And
right. What year did that one come out?
What's that?
What year did the original come out? Because you say $2, so $2 related to 1977. Okay, so that'd be like $300 today.
Yeah,
but
77, 78. Yeah. So it's gone through 12 editions. The third edition through Firefly.
Yeah.
And so there was a real environmental nub to get this book out, from my perspective. And if it helps canoeists, that's great. So
when you put out another edition of the book, are there changes made to the routes, or are there modifications from one publication to the next?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's luckily, and I got people on occasion, they'll say, well, look, that portage wasn't there. Well, I said, it's on the other side of the pond now. Well, I said, that beavers flood areas and they change the dynamic of portage trails often. And I said, I can't control that, or somebody said, well, there's a fire through there, and I, between editions, I can't update until the publisher says, okay, well, we can get another issue up. But, I had somebody talk to me who went on a canoe trip and didn't realize that fire that burned, big percentage of the park. And they said, we had a terrible trip. We had to walk through, burned out trees on the portages. I said, well, man, this is, if you travel across, especially in northwestern Ontario, where fires are ravaging the boreal, I said, this is part of the experience now. This is climate change, and then this is happening. And we have to maybe adopt, a different way of thinking on our canoe trips, that we may expect things that we don't like to see anymore. I mean, there's all the development that's going on in different areas that aren't protected yet, and things that happen in protected areas. There's a lot of problems in protected areas by people who disregard the proper etiquette. And so it's a tough call. I can't put that all in my books. I can update. I know on the Manitoba book, I had somebody from Manitoba say, well, this portage is wrong here. And I actually had got a trip together, a commercial trip, just to go that summer to take a group down to check on that portage. And it was fine. It was exactly where I put it. And on my maps, and I'm usually pretty careful. I'm not perfect. There are times when it needs updating, and I take this into consideration when I can get when the book is reprinted, and if the publisher allows me to make changes. But luckily, there hasn't been a lot of complaints about the information in the books, which I'm very happy. That it means that the field work that I've done is reasonably accurate, and that I if you have to look back in the days when they used to do aerial surveillance for mapping out canoe routes in different districts and in different provinces, they used to hire a student with a map and a notebook, and they used to fly over areas, and they used to guess where the portages were, and what was a rapid, what was a fall, and this led to a lot of the problems, and led up to my production of the and certainly the research done on the Missinaba book and all the deaths that had occurred because of improper maps. And so the Temagami book was the first book that I put out, and if people remember, the first river guide I did in, I think, 1986 was the Des Moines River Guide, which was kind of a test run. More people were doing whitewater trips. The type of canoes were changing. It was standard cedar canvas or aluminum canoes and fiberglass on occasion. People were doing bigger rapids and doing more river tripping. It was very popular, starting back in the 1980s. And the Des Moines, I hadn't done the Des Moines, so I went with another couple. I soloed on that one with another couple, and we did it was a 2.5 week trip from Kippawa down to Des Moines, and I mapped that out at the time, and spent a lot of time mapping out these rapids into the the detail that's there. And I'm taking a chance. There is an international river grading system, but if you look at how people grade rapids, it's very varies from state to state, from province to province, from canoe group to canoe group, from individuals who. And today, when I mapped out the earlier rivers, I was fairly conservative, because at that time people were still running with cedar canvas boats. And we didn't have float bags, we didn't have thigh straps, we didn't have all that fancy gear, and nobody wore life jackets. They shoved them under the seats because they didn't fit very well, and we ran rapids without them for years. And so things have changed as far as gear goes, and so and that went over very well. And then I found out, after a couple of years, I ran several trips down to Des Moines. It was one of my favorite rivers. And I found out, I asked Ron Bowes, the pilot who used to fly in there, I said, how many trips a year do you do on the Des Moines? He says, I fly in 500 canoe parties a year. That's a lot. And I was beginning to see, damage to the campsites and portages. And I said, well, let's look at a much larger area. So that's where, that's where this book came in. Rivers of the Upper Ottawa Valley. That's
Mhm.
a picture of my wife Andrea, and that's a picture of me back in 1989. And
A young Hap Wilson,
yeah,
younger Hap Wilson.
yeah, when I had good knees and good shoulders. So the whole concept was to spread traffic out again, and that's it was hailed as one of the best places to sort of take in short duration pool and drop rivers that were exciting. They had all the right formulas. Fishing was still good. Campsites were good, and wasn't that busy. With the traffic being spread out, less likely to see people back to back on portages and no trouble with campsites. And trying the whole idea too was to try to protect that, give it more notice in the public eye, because Quebec Hydro has been doing a lot of damming on some of the smaller rivers, and the Chippewa at one time they wanted to divert the water from Lac Des Moines into the Chippewa, so it would have affected the flow of the Des Moines River. So that there are a lot more people who realize the importance of not just the Des Moines now, but what's called the Three Sisters, the Noir, the Collonges, and the Des Moines, on all the other rivers that flow into the Ottawa. And the nice thing about doing the research on these rivers, not just the rivers themselves, but the content in the books, do a lot of research into Indigenous histories and the importance of protecting Indigenous sites and respecting them. White history, what changes have taken place over the centuries, and some of the more interesting features of what people can find there. And I think that's the difference between maps and the guidebooks. And that's people are whether they like the guidebooks or not. I mean, I could tell you a story where there was a commercial trip going down to Des Moines, and this was somebody came up to me at one of the trade shows, and they said, "Look, I have a story to tell. It was on a trip with such and such group coming down to Des Moines, and our leader would get out at the top of each rapid and go into the bush." And after a couple of times, they asked, "Well, what's the problem?" I have a bladder infection. I have to relieve myself. So after 3 or 4, trips into the bush, this fellow followed the guide into the bush, and there he is behind a tree looking at my guidebook, how to run the rapids. And so he thought that was a good story to relate to me. And I thought, yeah, that's guides often rely on that information too, if they're not adept at reading, getting that information, or reading the rapids themselves. That sort of gives them a little bit of a heads up.
That's the beauty part of your guidebooks too. It's so many people have relied on them over the years. Like you said, Temagami, Canoe Routes is 12 issues. The Mizunabee book, I'd imagine, is quite a few in as well, edition wise.
Yeah, that was that. People are familiar with that one. That was. That's gone through several reprints.
Yeah,
that one. And that was a book that. That was one that was. And I really missed the original artwork on the first guidebooks. And of course, when I went to Firefly, they picked up all my guidebooks, and they decided to go to the glossy cover. And much to my chagrin, I can only have so much power with the editors and so on. So, but they do, they look at the maps themselves are art, and just for fun, a lot of people don't realize how much work goes into the map work. But just a second.
But while you're looking there, I'm going to ask a quick question of everybody in the chat. Please answer this in case Firefly is watching. Do you prefer Hap's original style artwork for his covers, or what Firefly prefers to have as covers? What's your choice? This is one, and that's a number 2. I'm curious. Maybe Firefly will see this.
So Dennis, here's I've got, you see all this stack here?
Yeah.
There's I don't know if you can get a good idea. Well, there's over 400 art maps, and that's these are from all the books that I have on hand. You know, the type of artwork that goes into the maps and the art, you know, the artwork, all that stuff. I have over 400 maps, which when I was, you know, when Kirk Whipper was alive, he was a good mentor of mine, and we did travels in the Arctic and other places, and just a great fellow who I miss very much. I gave him this stack of maps, and I said, look, take it to the Canadian, you know, the Canadian Canoe Museum, see if they want them, and they turned them down. I couldn't believe it. I was just giving them away, and they
Right.
so, you know, they're here. I don't know what to do with them. 400 maps. I mean, I could probably sell them as art, you know, art maps, but
I'd say sell it all. I'll look
but
through that library, because I'll tell you, that's to me that's the artwork that I cut my teeth on, right? So
well,
yeah.
I really love old maps, and when I do the research for, you know, going into an area, and it's changed over the years. The initial, you know, we did all the field work. So you see a lot of these new maps that have come out. Well, I've done most of the groundwork for those new maps that are out there. It's just back then when I was researching some of the routes. I mean, you were using topographic maps, and you depended on them. That was the go-to map at the time. There was very few guidebooks. So I would go through, you know, old maps from the 1700s, 1800s, different areas, and then see, you know, what was, you know, it was very sketchy, but at least you got an idea of, you know, what might be a route. And so you're out there for days, and you're slugging on this creek, you know, for a couple of days, and it just doesn't go anywhere. It's not the connection that you want. And you're mired down, and, you know, you're pushing your canoe along, and you're waist deep in loon shit. And whereas today, you know, we map out an area. The last few times we've done some mapping, and you look at Google Earth, and you can zoom down. You know, you can see the details of rapids and creeks, and you can see if they're jammed with deadfalls, or, you know, what's there. So, you know, and we can you know, evaluate, you know, what's navigable and what's not, and it saves us a lot of time in the field. So a lot of changes over the years, but you know, these guidebooks take years to produce. Some of them took, you know, not a number of years, and the time in the studio takes as much time as the field work, you know, sometimes. But that, you know, that leads me to the Missinaba book. And I have to say that my wife and I, Andrea and I, back in 1990, I think it was, we were looking at the Missinaba to run trips on. And so our first trip down, and you know, we had lunch at one of the rapids, and then we saw a helicopter land, and it was search and rescue people, and we thought they were on maneuvers. And so, you know, we waved, we paddled by, we ran the rapids right in front of them, and didn't realize until we got out to the small town of Matthijs on the Missinaba that somebody had drowned in that rapid, and he'd been there for a couple of days. And we paddled right over his body, which was stuck on the rocks. Well, we didn't realize that, and then we heard another couple of stories that, well, you know, there's other people who've died there. So, you know, I said, well, I can do a little bit of research and see what, you know, and the Ontario government at the time was, you know, they were advertising, you know, these very expensive ads in Backpacker magazine and other magazines. You know, you can paddle from Lake Superior to James Bay and only cross 2 highways, and it's, you know, paddle from the Great Lakes to the sea kind of thing. And they were really flaunting this, and at that time and the Missinaba was a provincial waterway park and a heritage river. So, you know, it had some notoriety for sure. So, so they're actually, you know, the government was selling a product, and I started looking into the number of deaths on that. So I actually went down to ended up going to the, you know, coroner's office and getting permission to go down there. And I went through 500 files, and I isolated all the deaths that were on the Missinaba. It was over 30 deaths over a very short span of time. Then I had to read through third-party reports. It was gruesome, some of the stuff I had to go through, and just to find out exactly what was the problem. A lot of the problem was that the maps were incorrect. They weren't designed for, you know, you know, just backcountry travel. Basically, they were produced for political purposes and development purposes, and the white prints north of a certain line in Canada that they would only be updated every so often. And I even found out that at Thunderhouse, where there were 5 deaths alone, the Ontario Hydro wanted to put a power dam right at Thunderhouse. And of course, that's a sacred site. And again, the government doesn't look into into the Indigenous background and importance of some of these sites. So they had a cartographer say, well, let's put a portage. We marked it on a white print in a purple line on the wrong side of the river, in a place where you can't get to. 5 people died trying to get to that portage. And so I try to get funding. Sometimes it's hard to get funding. I had, Canada Parks back me on some of these projects, and private funding, and Manitoba Tourism, for example, helped out. And,
So not only are you throwing away, you're saving lives, from
well,
something that.
yeah, I had, when I called the Toronto Star, it was 1994, and I said, look, I got a story here. And they sent up, I was wintering on Michipicoten on Superior at the time, writing my Missinaibi book and getting all this information together. You got a good story here. And so he flew up and spent a couple of days, and we went over that. And I had been going through a lot of the Indigenous history at the Michipicoten Reserve, and they gave me, permission to go in and look through their archives for legends and that and what have you, and the importance of some of these places like Thunderhouse Falls. And I said, look, there's a real problem here. I said, there's so many mistakes. There's over, I don't know how many mistakes on the topographic dealing with the Missinaibi. And I had asked the ministry, I said, there's a problem here. I said, but they wouldn't put any funds into the pot for. And when you're doing guidebooks, you have to buy your time. You're not making any money doing all this field work, and that's expensive. So I tried to get sponsors, and the government said, no, I'm not interested, until I got the Toronto Star interested. It hit the front page of the Toronto Star in 1994. And I had gone down to Missinaibi again. I found the camera of these 2 guys from the United States. And well, what am I going to do with this camera? Well, I gave it to the reporter, and he got permission to put them in the newspaper article. And all levels of government could have been sued by that family because of lack of duty of care. Here's the park.
Right.
This is a park and a heritage river, yet they haven't made available proper navigation maps for this river. So an average of 2 people had died on that river every year up until the book came out in 1994, and since then there have been no deaths. So I'd like to think that and that's just one river of 1,800, I think 1,800 named rivers in Canada. That's one river. And people are still relying on topographic maps, and if they're not, if they don't know how to use them, that could be problematic. So that's a warning that I put out in my books. And one reason why the guidebooks, when I do research on rapids and falls, for example, the portage location is very important, especially if you pool and drop rivers where you have close waterfalls together or difficult rapids. And in spring and high water, a lot more people are running rivers in high water now. So they need to know where the takeouts are, the high water and the low water takeouts. So that was important too, to make sure that was part of the research in the map making.
Right.
So Missinaibi, it was well received. That led to some of the other books I worked on.
So let's go through some of the other books, because we're drawing close to the 8:00 break, and then I'd like to come back and actually go over some of your artwork, because
Manitoba, that was Wilderness Rivers in Manitoba. That was partnered with Manitoba Tourism and Canada Parks, and the first trip was down the Seal, and that's that led to that book. And that was the year of one of the worst wildfires in Manitoba history. And I also got to know and stay with the Taduli Dene people, which was a magnificent time spent there. Learned a lot. And I actually, when I write, I like to, it's not so much about me. It's not like, look what I've done, look at this adventure, that it's the thing about a writer. A writer writes he's basically a conduit to the people. So he's sharing information that he's discovered with the people, through his own research. And so that's something that I like to do with all my books. And that's the true nature of exploration, as opposed to adventuring. Adventuring is more self-gratulating, and it's sometimes egocentric. Is that it's a great adventure, but it's not exploration. Exploration has a strong component of geography, indigenous history, earth science history. That's true exploration. Anything else is just pure adventure, which is not bad. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that don't call yourself an explorer unless you're writing something that's for the people, that they're learning. They're sharing something that they've learned, and not just about self. That's something that I'm pretty careful in writing. Most of my books is that I do a lot of research into the background Indigenous, especially Indigenous history, which is so important today. Is that we're traveling on their land. There's no place in this country that hasn't been traveled by First Nations people. Anybody tells you that, I found a new route, nobody's been there, they're lying to you, because everything has been discovered and found eons ago by all our First Nations who have traveled this entire country. So yeah, you got to be really careful today. You brand yourself an explorer or an adventurer, and there is a big difference between the two. Yeah, Manitoba book, mapping out 19 rivers, and all of those rivers were in some way threatened, either by hydroelectric or river conversion. Like, I remember the Hayes was going to be it was going to be diverted into the Nelson River, where the dams are, and so that was a river that it's so historically important in Canadian history. That's where all the the settlers came up in fur trade in the York boats and settled in the Winnipeg area. And just a great river, and for its Indigenous background too, as well. So it's so all these rivers. I mean, you've got some of the best rivers now for whitewater: the Pigeon, the Blood Vein, Manicotagan, Gammon, Barrens, all of these rivers. And then further north, the interesting thing about Manitoba is that if you drive through Winnipeg and Brandon, all you see is wheat fields and grain elevators, and but you're in a great boreal forest. And then further north, you get into the Seal watershed and Caribou River, and up into that tree line area of Cochrane and the Upper Seal. You're getting into the open tundra grounds, which is, and then into the ocean, into Hudson Bay. So all of these geophysical treats, when you're out, mapping and exploring and doing it in such a way that you're hoping it's going to add some kind of protection status in the future.
Is that's kind of a great inspiration of yours for writing your books too, is by mapping it. And I think our buddy Kevin says it too. Use it or lose it, right? Get people to utilize these routes, and there's less chance that they're going to go away. But on the other note, it has impact as well as on the rivers themselves, right?
Well, I mean, that was one of the complaints by people who didn't understand, what was going on environmentally in this country. That they see and I remember a time when people didn't like guidebook writers, and because they said, well, you're monopolizing on that, and you're making money off of these guidebooks, and you're putting more people out in these areas, and they're going to get trashed, and so on and so forth. And I said, do you really know what's going on? There's a reality out there that exactly what you said. If you don't use it, you're going to lose it. And being an environmental activist and working for the government for a number of years, I know what the end game is here, and it doesn't look good. And if you're not out there protecting these areas, you don't get out there and canoe it and hike it, it's going to be gone. There's going to be more roads, there's going to be more mining. And like I say, we need a stronger, a stronger voice in the backcountry crowd. It's just not there yet. And so it's people like Kevin and I, who are spending a lot of our time doing these guidebooks for, again, it's not just to make paddling any easier, and then profiting off these books, which we don't make a lot of money off these guidebooks. When you look at the time spent on it, on the research, the time in the field, the expense of traveling, the time in the studio, if we didn't have other things to make money, we could not live off the royalties on these guidebooks. But this is a passion, that drives Kevin, and it drives myself and others who do, who make this material available. And it's been used by governments. Some of my, like the Manitoba book, has been used by the government to protect watersheds as part of their eco adventure, their adventure tourism mandate. So
does that put a smile on your face?
Well, it does. When I started mapping out Manitoba, in 4 years, I've maybe passed 20 people in all of those rivers. All those 4 years, spending a lot of field time out there, thousands of kilometers. Nobody using that resource, and there was a lot of, I can tell you horror stories about the development and what was planned for a lot of the backcountry areas, and so that put it on the map, and now, like the Pigeon is branded as one of the best, whitewater rivers in North America. The Blood Vein, certainly, I'll be talking about the Blood Vein in the upcoming Toronto show. What a treasure that particular river is. And, and you go back into Indigenous times, and there's no political boundaries separating, river systems. And it's just absurd when you think about, the rivers that flow into Lake Winnipeg on the east side all originate in Ontario. And, most of them originate in Ontario. And of course, the different politics and different ways of managing the resources or mismanaging the resources. So, this happens a lot through administrative districts, across our country. And you got to just shake your head and think, well, you can't take half a river, if you don't protect its origin, then whatever happens downriver, it's going to be, it's going to be screwed. So, yeah, we got a long ways to go yet as far as wilderness protection. But other books, certainly the
we'll get into your some of your novels that you've written as well, and then maybe into the a little bit about your art, because you have so much of it in behind you there too. Just after the commercial break, but did we miss any guidebooks?
Yeah, the Muskoka book. We mapped out 1,250 kilometers of the Trans-Canada Trail, the water trail. And that guidebook, that was a huge undertaking for us. It was a tough, planning that, to take in the communities, the First Nations communities, and avoid, any of the trouble areas like mining and what have you. So that book, certainly that was the last guidebook.
I don't have that one. Bring copies with you to the show in Toronto, because I definitely got to pick up a copy of that.
That's this one.
Let's go full screen on that. There we go. Lake Superior. Oh, okay. Yeah, I've seen it, but I haven't picked that one up yet.
So
maybe it'll inspire me to
get a guidebook. Voyages. I did all the artwork in that book, and it was done. I was doing a lot of work for Canada Parks at the time, and they asked if I would illustrate that book, and actually won the Natural Resources Council of America Award for Best Environmental Book, which was quite a treat, because that's all North America and Canadian and American books, and we were flown down to Washington to meet Al Gore, and a big dinner down there. He didn't make it because the Mexican president came to town, so we got somebody else to.
Oh, the Mexican president from Hap Wilson, did he?
So that book, it's nice every once in a while to get an award for the hard work that goes into some of these projects, and it's
kind of a labor of love for you, though, right?
I think it's the love of labor. I don't know.
Okay, well, with that being said, we're going to take a quick little break here, Hap. We'll be back in just a couple of moments, and we're going to get into your novels and a little bit about your artwork and stuff and your inspiration behind all that. Be with you in a short moment.
There's nothing like being out there. For over 50 years, we've been connecting people with nature by building classic Canadian canoe designs using the best materials available. We built a reputation on durable, dependable canoes that allow you to focus on what's important, whether that's unplugging in remote wilderness, spending quality time with your favorite people, or nailing the perfect line. Visit novacraft.com to find the perfect canoe for you and locate your nearest authorized dealer.
Tonight's episode of CANOEHOUND'S Outdoor Adventure Show is brought to you by Kid Products, stick stoves and reflector ovens proudly made in Canada. Algonquin Outfitters, with 5 key locations in and around Algonquin Park to serve your backcountry needs. Salis Marine, keeping you safe on the water since 1999. Ostrom Outdoors, custom fit canoe packs and barrel harnesses. And Novacraft Canoes, connecting you with nature in Canadian-made canoes since 1970. And welcome back to the second half of CANOEHOUND'S Outdoor Adventure Show. We have Hap Wilson as a guest tonight, and we're talking about his catalog of books, and we're going to be talking a bit about his artwork. We'll bring Hap back up here on stage right now, and you know what, Hap, we'll do the swag giveaway now. How's that?
Sure.
Hap's got a couple of books that he wants to give into the swag giveaway. Did you want to show everybody what you've got?
Sure. Well, we got.
I'll go full screen here. There we go.
Okay.
So we got Dance of the Deadman.
Dance of the Deadman. If you know Frank Wolf, does a lot of writing. Quite an adept explorer himself. He just wrote in Explorer magazine. He picked Dance of the Deadman as one of the top 10 books to read for this winter. So it's got a winter theme to it. And out of Abaddon, if you like apocalyptic books, it's different from anything else I've written, and it's been well received as well. But
excellent.
yeah, if I'm anything, I like to think of myself as an artist first, and everything else came by incidentally. So I've always been drawing and doing artwork. So since I was very young.
Cool.
And
let's just before we go on to that, let's let everybody know. So tonight's actual question is, how many years was Hap Wilson a park ranger in Temagami? We tried to touch on that a little bit earlier in the show. If you do know, drop your email or your answer to coasprize@gmail.com. You have until Saturday evening at midnight, and then at that time I will draw 2 winners. One winner is going to get Out of Abaddon, and the other one's going to get Dance of the Deadman. So, and we'll let Hap know the winner's address and everything. He'll get them out, and I'll also throw in a CANOEHOUND Adventures prize pack to the winners as well. So we'll just let that go on the screen for it. So, what was your inspiration in writing? Well, your first real novel was kind of the fire one. Oh shoot, brain fart. River of Fire, right?
Yeah, but I was known as a guidebook writer, and I got tired of doing guidebook. I said I would never do another guidebook, but I did the one for the Trans Canada Water Trail. So I ventured out into the short story genre, and that's where this book came in. This is still my best-selling short story book, and it's sort of autobiographical, and I think it was more written for inspiring people to do what where their heart is and their passion is. And some of the things that I had to go through when I was young, and being an artist was not the easiest vocation. And just sticking to my guns and doing people saying that even my parents were saying, well, they put me in a school that had a high school that had no arts courses, and because they said you're not going to make any money being an artist. That wasn't the emphasis. I mean, that was my passion, was to it was to explore nature, and the way I wanted to do that was through my drawings, and so that was trouble for me coming from home ground, and I was very adamant. I love to draw, and I stuck to my guns, and I I was actually surviving. I was canoeing. When I finished high school, I went into my own art business. I would do horse portraits, dog portraits, and sketches. And I'd have these showings. And I had a lot of high-profile customers at the time, and I offered a job at Simpsons as an illustrator. And at the time, I turned it all down because I'd rather go canoeing. I'd work in the wintertime I lived in a renovated chicken shack north of Toronto, in the country. And I would do my drawings in the winter. I'd sell them. And I had one of my great mentors was an older fellow who was the retired printer at Black Creek Pioneer Village. And he had a printing business set up in his basement. And I would go down on my motorcycle and take some fresh artwork down for bar mitzvahs and greeting cards. And then, and we'd print them off in his basement. And, I'd take some and I'd sell, greeting cards. I'd sell the originals, and it wasn't a lot of money back then, but it was enough to grub stake months of canoeing. I'd be out, canoeing, from break up to freeze up, and sometimes in between, and spent months winter camping, and living off my art at the time. I could, because I was alone. I wasn't married, so it was a free spirit. That's in the cabin book, and that's when I came across the cabin in Temagami for the first time back in 1970. It's quite an interesting history to that cabin. People want some of the background into what was going on in Temagami back in the 1920s and 30s. It's in the book, and it's like I say, it's pretty interesting stuff that was going on. Aside from the travesty going on with development in the area too, was it was part of my life and what I was going through to maintain my own passions, as an artist, writer, photographer, and people seem to like that book because it's from the heart. And it's like Kevin's last book too. It's from the heart, and a lot of emotional pith in writing. So that was the first book venturing outside of the guidebook genre. And
Okay.
the next book was a gritty Trails and Tribulations. 7 Ways to Die in the Wilderness was a bit rough for people. People either love that book or they hate it. A lot of young people coming out of the outdoor ed courses, and they have really a very basic foundation of what it's like to be a wilderness guide, or a park ranger, or a trail builder, and all of these things. So I wanted to write about it, and about the good things and about the tough things that you're going to face if you want that as part of your lifestyle. And it's there's beautiful things about it. There's also the reality that it's tough work, and it's tough guiding. I mean, I've done so many solo trips. I love solo paddling. You have nobody else to answer to except yourself, and to me it's so peaceful, so easy. You have 8 or 10 people on a guided trip, and the whole dynamics change. And you're in polar bear country, and you're carrying a 12 gauge shotgun, and a polar bear swimming across the river, and then and it's about 30 meters from your lunch stop, and then everybody drops their cameras and looks at you as the guide. What are you going to do? It's things like that, rescuing people, dealing with, the psychology behind outdoor living, outdoor guiding. And I always say it's 20% skill and 80% psychology. And if you don't have your head screwed on right, don't go into the business, because there's a lot to it that you have to understand, that people have issues. They have a lot of baggage, and it comes out under duress. And, it could be, 300 miles from the nearest settlement. Now it's lucky because we can get on the sat phone and say, look, get this guy out of here because he's a detriment to the rest of the people, and he shouldn't be here. And it's tough sometimes to, people sign, you talk to them on the phone, they sign the forms and you get them on the trip, but you don't know these people. They, and there's every form of, psychological deviant, that comes out. I'm not saying, everybody has the, every group is like this. I say, but on occasion you have to deal with this under different conditions. And, and it's tough, and you've got to knit people together, and you have to do this in such a way that's respectful to the group, to the people, and then to the individual who's having a tough time. And, and it could be, it could be windy for 2 or 3 days, and you have to know how it's safe to paddle at night. We can raft up and paddle down this section of the river. So you have to know where you are at all times. I know guides who get lost, even with not so much with GPS now, but before GPS, it wasn't that difficult. And I know people who have been stranded in the Arctic with the wind that's persistent, or they have flown in July and see that the ice is still on the lakes, and this is stuff that you don't know the geography, and you don't know the the little idiosyncrasies of our country and the natural environment. You shouldn't be in this business because there's a lot to learn, and it's different. My second talk at the Toronto Shore this year, I'm kind of excited to talk about, is fringe season paddling, and that's a lot more people going out and enjoying the the beautiful times that as soon as the ice is off, getting out there, and into the late fall. But there are dangers, inherent dangers, and it's different. It's different than the sunny days of July and August. And again, climate change has changed things out there. So it's I find it hard as a guide, and I've been guiding for all my adult life, and I find it hard to predict the weather. I could I could look at a gull flying upside down and tell you it's going to rain for 3 days, kind of thing. It's it's difficult now. So it's but anyway, that you either love that book or you don't like it because there's a bit of anger in there. But it's there's I'm not pulling any punches, because you don't do that if you want to learn, if you want to be good at outdoors, outdoor living. And I don't like to say survival because you want to aspire to something beyond that, beyond survival, tactics. You want to be able to do your job out there as a guide and then enjoy it, which I've done that and I still guide. I'm not doing any more commercial guiding, but up at our lodge, we guide people all the time. And I love it because I love to see their appreciation of nature through their eyes, and it's so rewarding. And,
Sure thing. Yeah, that's another book I'm gonna have to pick up and read. I've been doing a lot more reading of late, so that's good for me.
So
and
that's the next book. Short stories again. Different adventures, but I used Gray Owl as a kind of a spirit in the background, who's very critical of what I do, and I'm critical of what he's done, just as a kind of a specter, a ghost in my storytelling, and the different stories, from going undercover in the Magdalens during the seal hunt, trying to get some photographs out on the floes, and then Paul Watson coming in and getting beaten up in the hotel. And I had to flee to the interior of the Magdalens, which is not a big island, and having to set up my tent and during a blizzard and wait the storm out when there's 300 angry sealers who invaded the hotel. Stories like that. Stories about dog sledding, winter camping, a lot of stuff, and of course the Gray Owl. Working with Pierce Brosnan as his personal trainer. And I'm talking about the Attenborough movie Gray Owl, which was my introduction to how things work in Hollywood, which was fun, a bit frustrating at times, and but that story's in there. It's kind of people are usually pretty interested to see how 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 does the Canadian guide get in and be the instructor for a fairly well-known actor in there. That was um, sometimes depends on who you know and who you work for. And at the time I was doing work for Canada Parks, and we were actually trying to create a new group called Rivers Canada, and they were talking about, well, there's this new movie coming out, Sattenberg movie on Grail, and I said, well, Hap, they were saying that you should write the one of the directors is Jake Eberts, who produced Dances with Wolves, and a river runs through it. And so I wrote him a note, and I said, look, so many movies have people doing the goon stroke, and it doesn't look authentic. You need somebody to teach Brosnan the guide stroke, where he learned in Temagami, and that's what I initially learned the guide stroke, which is a bit of a mechanical J, but I don't do that. I do the Canadian stroke, which is a much more smoother stroke. But so if you look at some of his old movies, you can see that's what he learned in Temagami was basically the guide stroke. And so I got a call from Jake Eberts, and he said, Hap, you're going to get a call from Pierce Brosnan tonight. Are you home? And I said, oh, yeah, you're joking, really? Yeah, really? So I'm at home, and I'm sitting by the phone. I'm just laughing because I think this is a joke, right? Yeah. And of course, he says, hello, mate. Hey. So we got chatting to Pierce Brosnan, and he says, I'm really looking forward to having you come down to Malibu and teaching me how to paddle. And I better get out and practice throwing knives again. So I went out. It was wintertime, and I set up a target, started throwing knives, and I actually cut a tendon on my finger. I had to get it all bandaged up. And it was just one of these things that happens when you throw knives. Sometimes the blade's in the wrong way. Anyway, I hopped on a plane for Los Angeles back in the late 90s, and I had a carry-on bag full of throwing hatchets and knives. And this is what you could do back then. And picked me up in Los Angeles, and I had first time I got off a plane, picked up my baggage, which was just the backpack. I was dressed in my bush clothes, and I wanted to look part. I had my LL Bean boots on and a backpack and old tattered pants and bush shirt. And there's this guy standing there with a sign with my name on it. And it was a limousine driver, and he said, "Is that really for me, Hap Wilson? Yeah, I got to drive you up to Malibu, and we got I'm going to drop you off at the hotel." It was at nighttime, so I got out in the hotel. It was pretty fancy, right on the beach, and I went into the custodian there. He looked at me up and down, and he says, "Well, can I help you?" He's thinking this guy's a bum off the street. And I said, "Yeah, you have a room for me." "Are you kidding?" And I said, "Yeah, Pierce Brosnan." "Oh." And he looked at the book and he said, "Oh, you have friends in Malibu." "Oh, yeah." "Oh, Mr. Wilson, yes. Here's your." And it took me up to a room, and there was a wine on ice. There was a view of the ocean there, and and you could hear the seagulls. And I said, "Wow, this is what's like being in Hollywood. This this is pretty cool." And then because there's no place to paddle in Malibu, we had to look around. I met him the next day. And very honorable fellow, very devoted to his family. And we jumped in one of his BMWs and went and stopped, picked up a couple cigars and some sushi for dinner, and we drove around and went out to it was a reservoir. It was the only place that he started paddling. He said, "Well, I've been teaching. This guy's been coming up teaching me how to paddle." So I sat in the bow and he sat in the stern. I said, "Well, let's see what he taught you." And he started paddling, and I'm going, "Oh, gee. No, no." "Okay, just forget everything that he taught you, and we'll start from scratch." Yeah. And he was very stiff to begin with, very stiff. And they actually wanted Daniel Day-Lewis for the part, I think, for that movie. But Attenborough really liked Pierce Brosnan, and he really wanted to produce this movie with Pierce in it. So we spent a bit of time there, and went back home, and then we started throwing axes at his neighbor's support post to his cottage, to his house on the beach. He said, I said, "Where are we going to throw axes?" And he said, "Well, he's got a big post there. Let's throw it at." So we were throwing axes at this guy's building, and he comes out, and his deck is, "What's going on here, Pierce?" "Oh, we're just practicing for the movie." "Oh, okay." And he walked away. We kept throwing axes. Anyway, I went up. Anyway, we went up, spent about 3 months working with him off and on, and up in Mastigouche Park in Quebec and on the Gatineau, and being part of his group, hanging around, and his coterie of supporters. He liked having his trainers close to him. But we got on the outs. I did an article that he didn't like, and it was published, and the production company actually put it on their website. And he didn't really like what I was talking about. There was some stuff in the movie that was kind of not kosher, if I can use that word.
Mhm.
And a couple of comments that from Jake Eberts too. So and it wasn't a good article. So it was my fault for putting it out. And I didn't really, I didn't really go through the article well enough from his perspective. So, and we kind of fought about the environment. I said, and his wife actually at the time, lovely lady, wanted Pierce to go up to Temagami. And we were trying to get him to be, maybe a crusader for the Temagami issues at the time. And this was late 90s, and there was a lot going on in Temagami, and we needed a voice. He said, no, sorry. I'm a one issue guy. Wales is my thing. And, he's, and I said, okay. So we kind of butt heads a little bit. And I got in an argument with one of the co-producers, a young fella. And you don't do that in Hollywood. Okay. Anyway, they ended up taking my name off the credit roll. So I was a little bit upset about that, just because I was a troublemaker. But
Really?
That's who I am. I
got no
question
sense of
things.
humor, right?
I tell my kids when they went to school, they got on the bus, I said, I yell out the window, I say, look, question authority, fight the power. And,
Shit.
so
That's funny.
I'm kind of backfires on you sometimes. So
Anyway,
anyway,
I purposely remember watching that movie, and I knew you had something to do with it, and I was watching for your name in the credits, and that's why your name wasn't in the credits.
well, the fight scene. The fight scene was taken off completely. It cost them millions to produce that village on the Gatineau River, and the fight scene was pathetic. It was awful, and the stunt guy was paddling for Pierce. I went over. We could look at through the camera just to see. We would play back, and I said, "This guy's doing the goon stroke." If people see that, they're going to see the totally different way of paddling, because your stunt double doesn't know how to paddle a canoe. So I went to the stunt double. I said, look, you got to learn how to do it properly, or it's going to look strange on the movie. I can't. I've broken every bone in my body. I can't paddle that way. So Pierce jumped in the canoe. He said, I'll do it. It was windy that day, and an empty cedar canvas canoe it doesn't act very well. And he was good on the flat, but on the crossbow, and he was a bit stiff and weak, and it was cold water too. So he was a bit nervous. So they had two divers go down underwater and have a line attached to the bow and stern of the canoe. So when it came to do his quick movements, they would cue the divers, and they would jerk the canoe so it spun around on a 180 like magic, and he hardly touched the water with his paddle. And I'm thinking, this is great. People are going to see that I taught him how to paddle, and look at the way he's turning that canoe. He had two divers under the canoe pulling the canoe to make it work. Anyway, just things people. Anyway, the fight scene never got it never held water. So it was and the three assailants who were swinging chains and pike poles and things at Pierce Brosnan, trying to knock him out of the. They couldn't paddle worth a darn either, and the wind was blowing them all over the place. So they scrapped the fight scene, which probably a good thing.
Wow, that's funny. A little bit of history on the Grey Owl movie, right? Yeah. Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
So what's our next book?
Next book. Well, River of Fire.
Let me get that full screen. Very popular cover.
Yeah, it's been a really popular book, and that's River of Fire was the first book in the 19 River Manitoba River series, and talking about maps, the Canada Parks map they had just done a survey for the Heritage River. They did a map. They roughly mapped it out, and their map, when I unfolded it, was upside down and backwards printed. So I said, well, this doesn't. Nobody's going to be able to understand this map at all. So part of it was to map the river out and explore the area. And the story River of Fire, sure, it was there's a real tale about conflict within our own group, and dealing with wildfires, which was incredible. It was also the fight of with the Tuduli Dene, who were moved off their land back in the 50s because of the research that I had done. They allowed me to. I stayed there we were going to actually have a ceremony there with 3 visiting Navajo healers at the time. The Navajo have a very close relationship to the Dene people through their language and religion. So they were there getting ready for ceremony, and we were helping get poles for a sweat lodge. But the fires were within a couple of kilometers, and they had to evacuate the elders and the women and children at the time when we had left. But the story, where I stayed, with the chief's daughter and her husband, and we camped there and learned a lot about the history of, and they had written a history of the Tuduli people. But I went deeper into what was going on and why were these people relocated. And it turns out that there's a lot of reasons at that time in the 50s why whole bands were relocated. Like this one was relocated from their traditional territories to the town of Churchill. A lot of stuff going on. There was government caribou tagging at caribou crossing points, which was very sacred to the Dene people, very important. And they could, just that disruption with helicopters and boats, motorboats, could change the whole traffic of the caribou migrations, and mining and prospecting, all in that area at the time. So you've got these, mining going on, and the government just wanted to make sure that there was nothing that would disturb the commercial the commercial exploration that were going on. And they were moved to Churchill, which was disastrous for the Dene. And so on their own volition, they decided to go back to set up their own village on the top of an esker on a lake, and back in the 1970s. And it wasn't until I think 2 decades later that the Manitoba government actually started funding, putting a little bit of money into restoration of their community. And today we're working, Andrew and I mapped out the North Seal, that was, so we've done the whole North Seal and Seal River watershed. And we passed on, part of our work and exploration is to pass on any of the archaeology that we find. And we find a lot because we don't just paddle, we explore by foot. And so we found a lot of archaeology, which goes back, we just passed it on to indigenous bands wherever it's appropriate. And I got in trouble with the Manitoba Archaeological Society because I'm an amateur archaeologist. They said, well, we found some amazing sites, tooling sites and way markers, and they wanted all the information. I said, well, this isn't your information. They were going to take me to court. And I said, well, no, this isn't this belongs to the indigenous people. It belongs to the Dene or the Swampy Cree or the Saulteaux Ojibwe. I'm not going to give you that information. You have to, this is information that if you want it, then you have to negotiate with the people.
With them, yeah.
So anyway, that's some of the stuff that goes on when you're exploring, and some of the things that if you don't understand that what you do and what you're exploring is you're not on the territory. Not quite often, as much as we can, we'll stop and get permission from whatever community that we're going through, and either have a ceremony, tobacco ceremony, or we've had sweat lodges and traditional dinners, and we've donated some of our funds to buying hockey sweaters and such, that kind of thing. And most importantly is that ask permission to be paddling on their territory. And they think, wow, this is amazing. Hardly anybody does this anymore. There's a story in Tuduli where kayakers went and they landed by airplane, and they ran with their kayaks down to the water as fast as they could, and without stopping, without talking to anybody. And And some of the elders came out and started yelling and cursing at them because only people with kayaks were the Inuit, and they were their enemies for eons. And so all they saw were these two kayakers, thinking that they were Inuit were attacking them. So they ran after the kayakers and chased them down to the lake. And but anyway, that was
Cool. Wow. Okay.
side.
So that's River of Fire.
River of Fire. It's the only time I ever pulled a gun on anybody. So yeah, that was pretty tense. So
Wow.
yeah.
There's something else I just learned about Hap Wilson.
Dance of the Dead Men. It's one of my favorite books. I love history and historical stories, and the Legend of John Hornby. It's a real story, Canadian story. You'd have to look it up. There's lots of stuff about John Hornby. Lots of books have been written. My approach is different. I've been up on the Thelon. I've been to the grave site. I sat in the cabin just to feel the energy of the site. Explored the areas there. Andrea and I have both been up there, and and I've actually been on some of the other places where John Hornby traveled up on the copper mine, and traveled overland for miles and miles just to get the feel of the land up there. And I feel like you can't really share a story unless you're intimate with the land. And that's one of the best parts of the field work, is to get there. And I remember sitting beside, smoking a pipe with the three graves that are there on the Thelon, one of the most remote places in Canada. And I sat there, and I was with a film crew from City TV in Toronto, and Bob Hunter, who's the co-founder of Greenpeace. We're doing a story. He was doing a story on the Thelon. Because at that time they wanted to deregulate the Thelon Game Sanctuary because of mining interests. So we were doing a story, environmental story. But sitting beside the grave sites, the three crosses there with the three fellows that actually perished, and it was a still day. We're sitting there, and I smoked a pipe, and I said, well, I'm sharing a pipe with you guys. That was an ordeal you went through. Wind came up just at that moment and blew everybody's hat off. And it was the strangest feeling, I'll tell you. And it's not the first time I've had these occurrences at places where there's been a lot of trauma and hardship, and or sacred places too. And so that story, a lot of research went into period material, right down to the moon phases at the time when they were there. Temperatures and all that kind of thing. Researched they carried suitcases back then on trips, and the type of suitcase, the type of rifles that they used, the regiment where Hornby was in World War One, some of the battles, and so part of that for me was making it real, and then adding conversations between the three men through that ordeal. So that's Dance of the Dead Men. And that's, again, been well received.
A lot of people in the chat were really impressed with that book as well, as was I. I thought that was a fantastic read. Yeah.
So the latest book out of Abaddon, The Long Journey Home, actually started writing this 25 years ago, and it was based on a story I read in the Utne Reader magazine, and I said, well, there's some strange things going on, during the Reagan administration, the Star Wars program, and they were actually experimenting with these towers up in Alaska for altering weather patterns by shooting these electromagnetic pulse waves up into the ionosphere. So I built that into present day, and of course they were warned by scientists that this could create huge blackouts. Electrical blackouts, and if you're following the Ukraine-Russia war, or any recent war, you'll know that there's been a lot of electronic warfare going on, and this is actually a scary reality of what we don't know. A lot of the things that we don't know, and so there's that written into the book. There's a lot of science, which is real science that I've uncovered, and built that into a survival story. That what if And we know that, most cities can only survive 3 days during a blackout, and then everything just falls apart. And how do people survive long periods of time when everything shuts down? Like, we're so connected to the internet, and
the grid,
everything's hot wired into the internet, and dependent on its security, and it's not secure. That's the reality of it, and it can break down. And if, how do we survive? How and who would survive? It's all in the book, and then it's actually a survival guide. I wrote it as part survival guide, and and that comes from my own experience as a wilderness traveler guide, and a homesteader. I've been homesteading off grid, or lodges off grid, for years, and how would we cope, and how would we protect what we have in such an event? And it's also a love story. So it's so there's a lot in the book that I think people find it. Anybody who's read it told me that it's, they can't put it down. It's a great adventure story. And that makes me happy, because like I say, I started writing this book 25 years ago, and then fine-tuned it, and then waited for certain politics to mature and happen, and then finally had it to a point where, okay, this is timely now. And there's been science and stuff that's just coming out now, and I had written about it in the manuscript years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that science is just being known, like fusion energy, for one thing. And what's happening with all of the eruptions on our sun, for example, is something that's people are starting to think, are things changing, or is this normal? And they warn and say, well, there might be some, if with those EMPs, those electromagnetic pulses that come off from the sun, creating our northern lights that we so enjoy, it could damage the infrastructure if it's deep enough, and it could create huge blackouts. So
yeah, how patient do you have to be to sit on writing a book for 25 years? What draws you back to it? Like, if you take a hiatus from it, is this something, say, this would be good in the book?
Yeah,
at the 14-year mark.
Yeah, it has to be timely too, and then you think, well, there's things that haven't happened yet, and you just keep adding. You've got all your rough notes, and then you write the book. And I've actually written the book, and it's the same with the River Fire. I actually wrote that in 98, 99, and I didn't like it. Because I didn't put in, it was too much of like me in it, and it's just another adventure story, and that's not what I do. So I had to include the story that that calamity with the relocation of the Dene people, and that was a lot of the emphasis was on what they went through, and so I had to rewrite it. But yeah, it's frustrating, because there's a good book there, and you just wait for the time that's appropriate. Like I said, it's timely when this is what people are looking at. Farley Mowat was a mentor of mine. He went through a couple of manuscripts. He loved Grail and Me, and one of my other books, and I gave him the first manuscript of that. And he's, at the time, that was several years ago, actually, and he's passed away now, most people know. And he said, no, you got too much going on there. It's a bit overwritten, and nobody's buying that science fiction stuff right now. And he was right, and this is one way for a writer to learn. My first article was overwritten. It was terrible writing, and I was in my early 20s, and I got paid big money. Like $300 was a lot for a feature article back then. And I rewrote that thing, and it's frustrating, but that's how a writer learns. That's how an artist gets better at what he does, is that you have to accept criticism. And I did. And that's, and that article finally came, and, the editors said, well, if you didn't draw so well, we wouldn't print your work. Well, I want to be better. I want to do better in my writing. And so that, and I also learned too, I stopped really doing, a lot of magazines went to the internet and stopped producing real magazines, the pay rate dropped for writing articles. And I said, it's not worth, I put a lot of time and effort into articles, and it's just not worth my time to do that anymore.
Right.
And at one time I was doing a lot of article writing, tons of it. And I was the outdoor editor, northern field editor for Outdoor Canada magazine at one time. And I learned that, I could send an article to one magazine and they said, this is a piece of crap. And I just, okay. So I sent it to another magazine. They said, this is brilliant. This is the editorial world. And, I always said that editors are just frustrated writers,
Yeah.
But that's the thing, for those would-be writers out there, don't lose hope, because stick to your guns and learn from criticism, because it's the criticism that makes you better at what you do. And I've had to deal with criticism all my life, and not my problem.
You got broad shoulders, man. You stand up to it all. That's a good
yeah,
thing.
pretty much, and I like to think that, my books are putting something back into, and they're all, nature related. So I've got so much out of what I do, and then the people that I've met along the way, and it's just my way of, putting something back that seems worthwhile. That's, maybe it's a legacy. I don't know. This is all incidental to me. I didn't intend to be a writer. I didn't intend to have, the credit that I've been given, and I'm very, very flattered that I receive it. It's and it helps me along, and I just keep what I'm doing, because it's nice to get a pat in the back every once in a while, and that encouragement.
So, all being said, how many titles do you have?
I have 15 titles. I've added. I wrote a poem this year. It was accepted into a North American book. It was funny. I do a lot of writing for other books. I've done a lot of chapter writing and a couple of books I did this year. But my own title, I think 15. I think.
Okay,
and
so
that's not the number.
Everybody go count their Hap Wilson collection,
Yes.
And if you don't have 15 books, time to visit his website, check out and get yourself a really cool autographed edition right from the man himself here. So that's cool. I know I've got a few, and I'm very proud of them. Very proud of them. So you mentioned way earlier in the show that you're an artist before you are a writer, and probably even an activist. I see you got all these beautiful works of art behind you. Many of your guidebooks are just strewn with, the map work is art in itself. Just some of the illustrations that you have in there, especially your Temagami book, is very illustration strong as far as scenic shot or images and stuff. Like, look at that. That's great stuff on the Mizunami one, right? First, I think one of the first times I met you, and of course my daughter told me I was fangirling at the time. I don't know why, but I showed Hap. I have actually a tattoo, and this is long before, like I say, that his Temagami book was my holy grail for, cutting my teeth in the paddling genre, right? And there's a few images there that I had a tattoo artist trace, and he tattooed it on me. And I showed it to Hap, and he goes, hey, he kind of looked at me funny. It's like, what the hell are you doing? Type of look, right? Yeah.
My lawyer's going to get in touch with you.
Artwork. He goes, I didn't do that.
That's funny.
But no, that just goes to show the inspiration that and how much I enjoy your artwork. So let's talk a little bit about your inspiration of your art, why you are an artist. And I'm going to put this up here as well, and you can actually can you read this this quote that I'm going to put up? I showed it to you earlier. You mind reading it? Here we go.
Oh, it's too small for me.
Too small?
I
Okay, it
can't.
says I believe there's a harmony between art and conservation that can help keep the wilderness alive in the hearts of others. My passion is to stimulate the desire in people, not just admire, but to protect the beauty of the wild that we've been so fortunate to inherit. Sorry, I haven't got my glasses either. That there, I wish I could have put that quote on the thumbnail for the show, but I told Hap it was too long. I couldn't fit it on that thumbnail. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I guess it kind of sums it up. Yeah, for me, I've been drawing all my life since I know what inspired me was I was like 6 years old and I won the Dad's Cookie contest and a Kellogg's Cornflakes Draw the Package contest. I won a car racing set and a baseball glove. And I thought, wow, this could be pretty lucrative, for a 6-year-old, winning all this this bling from just doing, drawings. This was it, but that wasn't the reason. That wasn't the driving force for drawing. I just loved to pick up a pencil or a crayon and then do stuff. Yeah, I don't know, and it could be it could be traced back into our bloodline. Where I have a Scottish background of my father's side and French from my mother's side. We were Huguenots who were banished from France. They were the poets and artists, and the troublemakers. So yeah, hard to say where that bug came, but that was something that was eating me up. I know as a youngster, and I just through high school, I would draw all the stuff in the yearbooks, and I'd be invited to poster parties, and nobody wanted to date me because I was a weird guy. I'd be running outside in my bare feet, with a buddy, and we'd throw a lacrosse ball around in the middle of winter, with just shorts on, and we were a bit strange, or we'd be off canoeing and not show up at school for several days. And but I'd get invited to all the poster parties, anything having to do with drawing, and I'm happy to do that kind of stuff. And then I got a little more serious about that. My parents were dysfunctional. My father died early, and my mother did her thing, and I was off when I was about 18 on my own. So I had to find a way to make some money. So everything from, I was a house sitter for Anne Murray in Toronto for one day. I freelanced as I apprenticed as a carpenter for a couple of years, where I learned my carpentry skills. That was great.
Okay.
I worked in orchards, picking apples. I worked a lot with horses back in the day. One of my good clients was they ran the Polo Pony Ranch in north of Toronto. So I had some good clients. I had clients at the time. I was doing house portraits and won a couple of awards in the early days, and so that inspired me too. I said, I'm I'm getting better at what I do. And I know on my motorcycle, I would go all over the countryside. I'd stop, I'd hop a farmer's fence and see an old shed with a mule out the back, and I'd draw that and then turn it into like a greeting card or a hasty note. Some of my work was picked up by World Wildlife Fund and Canadian Wildlife Fund and World Wildlife Fund and Austin Marshall Card Company. And so I was like 21. And so I do artwork, like I said, in the wintertime in my little chicken shack in Lasky, Ontario, near King City, and then go paddling for 6 months. And I take a sketch pad with me, and all I do is sketch. And that was what I use now. If I want to look back and see what was I doing, back then, and what did my first cabin I built, my illegal cabin built in the wilderness for $40. That's what it cost me, and that it's all written down in my illustrated journals. And I think I put some on Facebook, and people got a kick out of that. Even poetry. I was writing poetry at the time, and spent a winter, 3 months. A buddy of mine went up to Temagami. I just had my appendix burst where I was living, and they picked me up off the floor, took me to the Richmond Hill Hospital, and to get him up to the operating room. He's almost dead. So, and 2 weeks later, I was on the train going up to Temagami with a home built Wanigan on a toboggan that we had fashioned got off the train in Temagami and started walking across the lake. And I thought, I was going to split a gut. We looked at Lakeland Airways. They had 2 planes on skis, and went in there and said, how much to fly into Diamond Lake? Because we had hidden a wood stove, and there was an old cabin, logging cabin that we were going to stay in while we winter camped. And Lakeland said, well, it's expensive. You guys got to fly in. It's $40 for the 2 planes to fly into Diamond. So I said, I'm going to die if I don't, I can't walk in the 65, no, it's about 70 kilometers up there. And there was deep snow and a crust on the top. And I was going to burst my stitches at the time. So anyway, spent 3 months up there on extensive winter camping trips from a base camp cabin, and did a lot of writing and lots of artwork. But that's what I did for years, from up until I got a job as park ranger. So, and those journals were, I tell young people, I tell them, if you're in the outdoor business, if you're interested in the outdoors, start, keep a journal, because you'll thank me, or thank yourself for keeping those journals, when you're a teenager and going to camp and having these great adventures, and, sharing things with like-minded people. And you can look back over the years and say, wow, did I really write that stuff? And well, that's not a bad sketch. And sometimes I'll look at my old sketches and I'll rework them, and I'll bring them into a finished piece. I do that a lot, actually. I got hundreds and hundreds of drawings. I had storage unit broken into, and they stole a lot of my stuff. It's just stuff. Geez. But the one thing that I'm very sad about was a suitcase filled with all my early artwork, all through high school. And it was just a treasure to me, and it was stolen. So if somebody out there has my artwork,
send it
I hope
back,
you enjoy it, because it was part of my life, and part of my history, and that was more important than any other thing that I had in that storage unit.
Cool. This is some of the artwork you have showcased on your website here. I got 2 lots of like 8 or 10 pictures here. Pick one picture and just give us a little brief story on it. We got about 10 minutes left here in the show, but just so that we have a better feel or understanding of the image. So pick one. I'll open it up here on screen, and then.
Yeah, well, every one of them has a story for sure. Well, let's pick Ancient Pine, top row, middle picture. It's the colored version. That's the original, which I'm almost reluctant to sell in my gallery. And it was done as an environmental poster back in 1991, I believe, for the Temagami Wilderness Society, now Earth Roots now. And I was a co-founder for that group in 1986. And we're always looking for ways to pay for lawyers and for printing costs and that kind of thing. So we're always coming up with ideas. So I did a couple of posters. That was one of the edition posters that I still have some available, some of the edition prints. The edition prints were printed in a sepia tone. And I think I still have a couple out of 950. I think I still have a couple hundred left. And so that's kind of a story. It's just, back then there was a lot of things going on with, and I think the quote says it all. There's more to protecting a forest than just the trees. And there's so much. I remember talking with Gary Potts, the chief of the Temagami once, just after the blockades. And he said that I can stand there and I can grab a hold of an ancient pine, and I can talk to my ancestors. And I think that was so true, that we don't really understand the importance to protecting some of these ancient forests, because we don't know enough about and that interconnectivity with species, different species in the forest, not just pine trees, but with everything that grows in those those types of forests. So, and that was the big thing in Temagami at the time, and everybody knows that was an international issue at the time, and Temagami was put on the International Union for the Conservation of Nature Endangered Species list, back in the 90s, back in the late 90s, and for good reason, because there was again, we had the wilderness park was way too small, and there was not enough protection for those huge, vast stands of old growth forests. And we were at a time when we didn't know enough about, how do we replenish that forest instead of, just producing monocultures after the clear cuts. And and that poster had a big meaning for me and for a lot of the people who I'd worked with in the environment in this business, and a lot of the crusaders who stood on the blockades, and people who spent time chained to Komatsu bulldozers, and people who climbed trees and camped out under inclement weather. And so that there was a lot of activity going on at the time. That's just one piece of art that I did for our group, our environment group, to help them fund some of the projects.
I'm just going to go back 2 pages here to the way it was. There we go, because I'd like to jump to the next group and pick one on here to tell us a bit about.
Yeah, every one of these has a story, and yeah. I have so much artwork on file and in my gallery. I'm almost it's not open generally to the public unless you phone and you want to come and view things. But on the occasion, people will drop in, and it's great. We chat and they look at the artwork and maybe buy a book or a print. It's not that important, but we love meeting people for sure and sharing stories. Yeah,
but I'm just looking here. I see Red Canoe. You actually have
Red
prints
Canoe.
of it, but the original has sold. How does that make you feel when one of your originals sell?
I'm sad.
Is there remorse?
In
Seller's
a
remorse?
way, and I want to make sure it goes to a good home. It's which it did, and it's almost a sacred place for me. It's a hidden channel in Temagami, and it's just one of my favorite places that few people go to. The main canoe route bypasses that, and it actually has to be fairly high water to get through. But these like little quiet places that having spent so much time in Temagami that I'm familiar with. So it's a special place. All my pictures have some story to it. The Red Canoe. I did a red series. I thought, I think what inspired that was a movie, Schindler's List, which I thought was a powerful movie, and it was done in black and white, but it was the girl's dress that was throughout the movie was red, and it was such a powerful note that I thought, well, maybe I'll try that in my artwork. Just have a flash of color and see how it, because black and white art isn't as popular as color art. There's a smaller market who appreciate the time. It's harder for me. I could do a painting in a couple of hours and I could sell it for $1,000. But it's the detail. Some of these drawings, like if you look at the top, go back. If you look at the one on the top right, Blackwater Reflections, that took probably 3 or 4 months to do, and it's watercolor and stippled ink. It's just dots. It's just thousands and thousands of dots. It takes hours and hours and hours of concentration.
It looks so realistic.
And I had somebody who wanted to buy that, and I said, well, and this person worked for the government. I said, I want what you make in 3 months for that picture. And he said, what? Really? Yeah, I spent 3 months on that picture. That's 3 months of my time where I wasn't making any money. And that's what that picture is worth to me. Mm-hmm. And so it's a realization that, the amount of time that goes into some of these art pieces, like even the art maps for the books. And I love doing the art. I love doing the map work and the map art because it takes me back to those places. And it's like paddling those rivers and lakes again, when I'm drawing out and I'm working on, I really enjoyed that spot. Well, that was a tough place because I couldn't find a campsite there, or, I almost drowned there. And so I go through it. I'm sitting at my art table, and it's my way of getting into my art and enjoying that trip all over again. just by doing that. It's the same with all the art pieces. Like I'll pull stuff from my old sketchbooks, my field notes from like the 1960s and 70s and 80s, and I'll incorporate that into a modern piece, and it works. And I feel like, well, there's a bit of my history there, and it's, it's like a quilt blanket. You're sewing patches of your life together for a new story, and that's the way it is. And that's, like I say, I've always been an artist, and I like to think of myself as an artist. But everybody's an artist, in some way or form, whether it's cooking, whether it's singing, musician, building a dry stack wall of stone. It's all art. Everybody has some form of artist within them, and it's sad because a lot of people don't realize or nurture that enough. And it's part of your well-being. If I couldn't draw, I'd be a sad person. I have, if you look at my fingers are all going out of shape from arthritis, and it's a bit sad for me because I can't grip things the same way I used to. So I have to learn how to do things a little bit differently. I mean, we're all, you get older and, things wear out. I've got 2 replaced knees. I've got a replaced shoulder coming up, it doesn't, I mean, I don't regret any of what I've done. I've done a lot of mileage, and it wears on you. It's like an old car, wears out. The engine's still running. It's still good, but it needs new brakes and new shocks and
tires, and the body's falling off it, and the whole
yeah. I mean, and you go through so much pain sometimes, and I just think that I'm so grateful for the path that I've been on, and I see other friends that have gone through tougher times than I do health wise, and my physiotherapist said, and I had a sports medicine doctor both tell me that the best medicine is just keep moving.
Yeah. You stop, you die. Don't do that.
Yeah, I'm not quite to the point where the voyageurs used to sleep sitting up because they thought their hearts would stop, and many of them only lived to the late 30s, early 40s. They used to carry such heavy loads.
We've hit our 2-hour mark.
Yep.
I'm going to go about 10 minutes over time here because we did have some great questions in the chat that I wouldn't mind fielding to you.
Yeah, for sure.
Just maybe for some really quick answers, just so we could try and get through a few of them.
Absolutely.
Hope you don't mind that.
No,
because we could go on for hours. I know we can. Richard West, who was like he was a real buzzer here going into the chat tonight. He had some great questions and insights. Any new books about your life experiences in the works right now?
There's always something in the back burner. I've been working on a cookbook for some time. It's in the back in my files somewhere, and I have a sequel to Out of Abaddon. It's in the works too, and I've got another book on which I just pitched to Firefly, which they're looking at now, which is the wood butcher's art. Building a simpler lifestyle. It's it's a construction manual for where to find materials that are cheap. People are living in tiny homes now. We've done a lot of work with tiny homes and small bunkies and cabins and that. And that's part of your lifestyle. Could be building a trail, could be planting a garden, could be a number of different things. The use of hand tools. A lot of carpenters don't even know how to hold a handsaw properly. And building that secret retreat somewhere. I built several cabins, not on my property, and I'm not. That's one of the books that I've been working on, which may be in the works. I don't know. But there's so many ideas that I wake up in the middle of the night sometimes with an idea and I can't get back to sleep again. So I get up and either write it down or I may just do a nice, just simple book on about rivers or also thinking about Dance of the Dead Men was so popular that, and I've had a lot of requests about, why don't you take something else and write about, and in the same style, put dialogue to the characters where, you can get lots of books on different, Canadian adventure stories. it's, but they're not written in that same style, and you don't get that feel that you're in that adventure with them unless you put dialogue and some of the things that might transpire between the lines of of the books that have already been written. So it's the detail there. I've been pondering something similar to Dance of the Dead Men. And there's a couple of ideas. I'm not putting it out there yet. Not until I'm sure what I'm going to do. The thing is, if I do pick another, then Andrew and I'll probably have to go and paddle and explore that area. That's part of what we do. So, which is not bad. It's good, great. If my joints hold up and I can still do the things I love to do. So.
Cool. Evan LaFave's asking, can you suggest some ways modern canoeists can uplift Indigenous communities they pass through?
Absolutely. And I think that's, and they, they're amenable to phone calls or letters asking permission, or even if you're paddling through. I know a couple of times when I paddled through, I've stopped and people come down to the docks and they say, look, I'd like to talk to, do you have a medicine healer, or can I talk to one of the chiefs and then maybe I just want to ask permission to paddle through your territory. And they say, oh, that's great. I remember the whole town showed up up in Brochet and in northern Manitoba. The whole town showed up, and it was a gathering. It was a reason to have a gathering. And then simply paddling into the dock and asking somebody, do you mind if we inquire about, of course, very few people paddle that area. So it was a bit of an anomaly to see, paddlers coming into the dock there. Finding out ahead of time, asking permission. There's there's a Shoal Lake Reserve on the border of Manitoba, which is part of the one of the routes that we mapped out for the Trans-Canada Trail. And I put in the book that you should, and a phone number to phone the band office to ask permission to paddle the Falcon River, for example. So finding out ahead of time and just asking permission, do you mind if we paddle through your area? And, they might say no, we don't mind, or they may say, yeah, we do mind, because there's trapping going on. We have, things going on that we don't want other people to interfere with. So yeah, then you have to respect that. So, and they're, in most cases, they're happy to oblige and just say, what are you asking us for? Sometimes they're just so surprised that you're even asking them that that they, I don't think I've ever heard of them saying no, really, from my experience. But yeah, no, lots of ways of contacting through social media, not through social media, but through the internet. You can contact any of them. If you're planning a trip, contact the band office first and foremost on the route.
I often wondered how the best way to reach out was, and that's okay. Cool. Hap, what a great evening, man. I cherish the time to get to learn a little bit more about you. I'm so happy that I asked you about this show back at the Winter Camping Symposium or the Canoe Symposium at the after party. I said, we got to talk about your art. We got to talk about your books, right? And you didn't disappoint. Thank you very much for spending the time with us tonight.
Well, I appreciate that. And I know a lot of people usually wait too long to order books from my website. And it's Christmas is coming up. So if you want, personally signed books, then please go to the website, hapwilson.com. Happy to sign it too. And we mail out to people who want to send them as gifts as well. So any art prints or books, and just go to the website. Appreciate that.
And Hap usually, when he sends you stuff, he'll send you a little bit of Hap Wilson art too. Going down.
Yeah, try to make it personal, and people appreciate that. So it's so I appreciate the support that for my books and that, because it just inspires me to keep doing what I do. So and thank you again, Dennis, for the invitation. And we'll talk to you. I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Yes, I am sure. Somebody said that we got to have you on the show again, and I'm sure this won't be the last time. Hap, like I said, so the best place for people to buy your books would be through hapwilson.com, because it's going right through Hap, and that's how you're going to get them autographed. Link is in the description below for anybody that may be interested in buying themselves a gift or picking up a gift for, maybe a loved one or themselves or whatever. It doesn't matter. Pick up 2, right? Doing a piece of art while you're at it. So, all right. Thanks very much once again. I'll see you in the green room here in a few short moments, and just going to close up the show. So stick around for a moment.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Yeah, you know what? Hap Wilson definitely is an inspiration to me. He's part of Hap himself. Is right here. So that's I always carry Hap on my shoulder. That's a good thing. Just want to mention to everybody, I noticed that Christian had purchased a bunch of gift memberships, I think 10 of them. If you were lucky enough to pick up one of those gift memberships, please drop me an email at canoehound@gmail.com, because I won't treat this any differently than any other membership. Drop me your mailing address and your name, and I'll get you a membership patch out. That's how it goes. That's how it goes. So if you did get one of them, drop me your mailing address and your name. We will be live next Tuesday evening. The week after that will be our annual Christmas party, because the holidays are only 20 days away, man. 20 days until Christmas. That's crazy. I better start doing some shopping. But if you happen to like the show tonight, please do hit the thumbs up. It really means a lot to the YouTube algorithms, helps us out. If you haven't already subscribed, if you watch weekly, at least hit that subscribe button. Feel free to do that, because it's free. Anyways, everybody have yourselves a great week. And remember, please do keep the adventures alive. Thanks for tuning in tonight. Bye-bye.